The story of how non-UK citizens migrated to the United Kingdom and how racism started is deeply intertwined with the history of the British Empire and the nation's evolving identity. To understand where we are today, we must journey back to a time when the British Empire spanned the globe, a time when Britain's influence reached from the shores of the Caribbean to the vast plains of India and beyond. During the peak of the British Empire, millions of people living in the colonies were considered British subjects. They were part of the empire, with rights that theoretically extended across the globe. However, these rights often existed more in theory than in practice. Despite this, the connection between the colonies and Britain laid the groundwork for future migration. The two world wars, especially World War II, were pivotal in this story. The UK, finding itself at the center of global conflict, needed soldiers, laborers, and workers to support the war effort. Britain turned to its colonies, calling upon men and women from Africa, Asia, and the Caribbean to fight, work, and rebuild. Many of these people came to the UK during and after the wars, with hopes of finding better opportunities and contributing to the nation that they had served. After World War II, Britain was in ruins. The war had devastated cities, industries, and infrastructure. The country needed rebuilding, and it turned once again to the Commonwealth, the collection of nations that were once part of the British Empire. The government actively encouraged people from these regions to come to Britain and help reconstruct the nation. This led to significant migration, particularly from the Caribbean, India, Pakistan, and Africa. In 1948, the Empire Windrush ship famously arrived in the UK, carrying hundreds of Caribbean immigrants who answered Britain's call for help. This event marked the beginning of large-scale migration from the former colonies to the UK. These individuals arrived with hopes of finding better lives, and they brought with them their rich cultures, traditions, and resilience. But the reality they faced was far from the promise of opportunity. While they were welcomed as laborers and workers, they were not always accepted as equals. The Britain they encountered was struggling with its own post-war hardships. Many native Britons who were facing economic difficulties and social upheaval viewed these newcomers with suspicion and hostility. This laid the foundation for racial tensions that would grow in the coming decades. The roots of racism in the UK can be traced back to the colonial mindset, where the British Empire viewed itself as superior to the peoples it ruled. This sense of superiority didn't disappear when the empire began to fade. Instead, it transformed into a domestic issue as immigrants from former colonies began to settle in the UK. The media often portrayed these immigrants as a threat to British culture and the economy, fueling fears and prejudices. Discrimination in housing, employment, and even in law enforcement became common, creating a climate of exclusion and inequality. In the 1960s and 70s, racial tensions reached new heights. Immigrants were often forced to live in poor, segregated neighborhoods and were subjected to discriminatory practices. Laws were enacted to limit further immigration, and these communities faced a constant struggle against systemic racism. The situation occasionally erupted into violence, with clashes between immigrants and native Britons, further deepening the divide. Fast forward to today, and the echoes of that past are still evident. The racism that began with the colonial mindset has evolved, but remains a significant issue in the UK. Recent events, such as the Windrush scandal, where Caribbean migrants who had lived in the UK for decades were wrongly detained or deported, highlight how deeply ingrained these issues are. Debates about immigration, multiculturalism, and national identity continue to shape British society. However, history also shows us the potential for change. The very communities that were once marginalized have made immense contributions to British society. Their resilience, culture, and determination have enriched the UK, slowly breaking down some of the barriers of racism. But the work is far from over. The story of migration to the UK is a complex tale of struggle and resilience, of a nation grappling with its past and its identity. It's a reminder that the history of racism in the UK is not just about the past. It's a story that continues to shape the present, and understanding it is key to building a more inclusive future. But this is just one chapter of the story. Next time, we'll explore how the media and politics have influenced public perception of immigrants over the decades, and what this means for the future of race relations in the UK. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification